Ashutosh nervously adjusted his tie as the taxi pulled up in front of Veronika's house in the posh suburbs of Delhi. It was Veronika's birthday and the first time he would be meeting her parents. After nearly 4 years of close friendship at IIT Delhi, their bond had blossomed from a tiny seed into a magnificent tree, its branches intertwined in an unbreakable connection. As he rang the doorbell, Ashutosh took a deep breath, steeling himself. The door swung open and there stood Veronika, resplendent in a blue sari, her eyes sparkling with joy at the sight of him. "Ashu, you made it!" she exclaimed, pulling him into a warm hug. Over her shoulder, Ashutosh caught sight of Veronika's parents, her father tall and distinguished, her mother petite and elegant. He stepped forward to greet them with a respectful namaste. "It's an honor to meet you, sir, ma'am," Ashutosh said sincerely. "Veronika has told me so much about you both." "The honor is ours, Beta," Veronika's mother replied with a kind smile. "Our daughter speaks of you constantly. Please, come in and make yourself at home." As Ashutosh entered the tastefully decorated living room, he couldn't help but marvel at the contrast to his own humble abode, the tiny servants' quarters he shared with his parents on the grounds of Dr. Kapoor's estate. His mother worked as a maid and cook for the wealthy doctor's family, while his father served as their driver and odd job man. It was a hard life, but an honest one, and it had given Ashutosh the opportunity to study, to make something of himself. The birthday celebration was a lively affair, with Veronika's friends and relatives dropping in throughout the day to wish her well. Ashutosh felt out of place amidst the designer outfits and expensive gifts, but Veronika made sure to keep him by her side, squeezing his hand reassuringly. As the party wound down, Veronika's father invited Ashutosh to return the following Sunday for a more intimate family meal. "I would be delighted, uncle," Ashutosh replied, hoping his nervousness didn't show. The week dragged by in a haze of final exams and job interviews. As one of the top students in his batch, Ashutosh was fielding offers from some of the most prestigious companies in India and abroad. But his heart wasn't in it. All he could think about was his upcoming lunch with Veronika's family. Sunday dawned bright and clear. Ashutosh arrived promptly at noon, his palms sweating despite the cool breeze. Veronika greeted him at the door with a radiant smile, ushering him into the dining room where her parents were already seated. Lunch was a sumptuous affair, with dish after dish of delectable curries, fragrant biryanis and fluffy naans. Ashutosh ate heartily, grateful for the bounty before him. As they lingered over dessert and tea, the conversation turned to the future. "So tell us, Ashutosh," Veronika's father began, his tone friendly but probing. "What are your plans after graduation? Surely you must have your pick of jobs from campus placement." Ashutosh hesitated, unsure how to respond. The truth was, he had no intention of accepting any of the glossy corporate offers that had come his way. His place was in Habibganj, the small town where he had grown up. He had a duty to his family, to the man who had made his education possible. But how could he explain that to Veronika's parents? Sensing his discomfort, Veronika's mother chimed in gently. "And what about other plans?" she asked, her gaze flicking meaningfully to Veronika. "Have you two thought about?" She trailed off delicately, letting the unspoken question hang in the air. Ashutosh felt his face flush as he stammered out a response. "Auntie, I cannot marry Veronika." Beside him, Veronika flinched as if she'd been slapped. "He's right, Mama," she said quietly, not meeting Ashutosh's eyes. "We're just very good friends. Nothing more." The rest of the meal passed in strained silence. Ashutosh made his excuses and left as soon as he could, his heart heavy. He knew he had hurt Veronika with his blunt refusal, but what choice did he have? He was bound by a sacred promise, one he could not break no matter how much it pained him. That night, Veronika cried herself to sleep, her mother's concerned questions echoing in her mind. Yes, she loved Ashutosh deeply, had loved him for longer than she cared to admit, but something held him back, some secret he guarded so fiercely that she dared not pry. If only he would open up to her, let her into his world. The remaining weeks of college passed in a blur of bittersweet moments, late-night chai at the campus canteen, impromptu jamming sessions on the hostel rooftop, tearful farewells at graduation. Through it all, Ashutosh remained steadfast in his resolve to return to Habib Ganj, deaf to Veronika's pleas to accept one of the coveted job offers in Delhi. She was so furious with him for abandoning her, for throwing away their chance at a future together, that she didn't even bother to ask for his address before he left. Let him rot in that backwater town for all she cared. She would move on, build a life without him. But moving on proved more difficult than Veronika had anticipated. Though she threw herself into her new job at a top IT firm, rising quickly through the ranks, her heart remained anchored in the past. She went on dates, even entertained a few serious proposals, but always there was something missing, that spark, that bone-deep connection she had shared with Ashutosh. Miles away in Habib Ganj, Ashutosh was carving out a quiet existence for himself. With his earnings from his job at a coaching institute, he was able to rent a small apartment for his parents, freeing them from their life of servitude. His father passed away suddenly 6 months later, but his mother was content in her retirement, spending her days in prayer and meditation. The pangs of loss Ashutosh felt at being separated from Veronika gradually dulled over time, but never fully faded away. He told himself it was for the best, that she deserved so much more than the meager life he could give her. But late at night, alone in his narrow bed, he ached for the warmth of her smile, the music of her laughter. 2 years passed this way, each of them going through the motions of living, but never truly alive. And then came the summons Ashutosh had been dreading, a message from the man he owed everything to, the man he called master. Dr. Prithvi Kapoor was a renowned surgeon, his skills legendary throughout Madhya Pradesh. But for all his wealth and success, his personal life had been marred by tragedy. His wife had died in childbirth, leaving him alone to raise their 2 daughters. The elder girl, Tanya, was a brilliant scholar who had gone abroad to study medicine like her father. But the younger one, Prerna, had been born with severe disabilities, autism, cerebral palsy, a host of neurological impairments that left her trapped in a broken body, her keen mind imprisoned in an uncooperative shell. It was Ashutosh's mother who had stepped in to care for Prerna when Dr. Kapoor was at his wit's end. With infinite patience and kindness, she had coaxed the sickly infant to eat, taught the flailing toddler to hold a spoon, sat by the growing child's bedside night after night when the seizures racked her frail form. Under her loving ministrations, Prerna had thrived as much as her condition allowed, learning to communicate through a complicated system of blinks and facial twitches. Ashutosh had grown up alongside Prerna, the 2 of them as close as siblings despite the differences in their station. When Dr. Kapoor noticed the servant boy's keen intelligence and voracious appetite for learning, he made the proposal that would change the course of Ashutosh's life. "Let me educate your son," the doctor said to Ashutosh's parents one evening after dinner. "I will pay for his schooling all the way through university. IM whatever he desires. In return, you must promise me one thing." Ashutosh's parents looked at each other uncertainly, hardly daring to believe such good fortune could be theirs. "Anything, Sahib," his father said at last. "We are your humble servants." Dr. Kapoor leaned forward, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "When the time comes, when your son has completed his studies and taken his place in the world, he will marry my Prerna. He will be a son to me, a brother to Tanya, and a loving husband to the daughter who needs him most. Swear to me that you will raise him with this promise in mind, and I will give him a future beyond your wildest dreams." Ashutosh remembered the gravity of that moment, the way the very air seemed to still as his father prostrated himself before their master, his voice shaking as he vowed to honor the doctor's terms. His mother had wept silent tears, whether from joy or sorrow he could not say, and he, Ashutosh, all of 10 years old, had felt a thrill of excitement at the thought of so much knowledge opening up before him, tinged with an inexplicable sense of loss. It would be many years before he understood the price he would pay for his education. Now, a decade later, it was time to fulfill his end of the bargain. Dr. Kapoor's message was terse, almost brusque in its formality. The wedding would take place in a month's time, Tanya was flying in from London to help with the preparations. Ashutosh was to wrap up his affairs in Habibganj and present himself at the Kapoor estate no later than the coming weekend. There was no question of refusing. Ashutosh owed the doctor a debt that could never be repaid, and he was a man of his word. But as he packed up his meager belongings and bid farewell to his students, he couldn't help but feel a deep sadness at the thought of the life he was leaving behind. The life he had once dreamed of sharing with Veronika. Miles away in Delhi, Veronika was going about her day as usual when an unexpected friend request popped up on her Facebook page. It was from Tanya Kapoor, a name she vaguely recognized as one of Ashutosh's IIT batchmates. Curious, she accepted the request and waited to see what the other girl wanted. She didn't have to wait long. Barely 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Veronika answered hesitantly, wondering if it was some sort of prank. "Hello? Is this Veronika Mehra?" A crisp British accent inquired. "Yes, speaking. Who is this?" "Tanya Kapoor here. Listen, I know you don't know me, but I got your number from a mutual friend. Arnav, I think his name was. I need to speak with you urgently. It's about Ashutosh." Veronika felt her heart stutter in her chest at the mention of his name. "Ashutosh? What about him? Is he all right?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if Tanya were weighing her words carefully. "He's fine, physically at least, but look, it's complicated. I don't want to get into it over the phone. Is there any way you could come to Bhopal this weekend? I'll text you the address. Please, Veronika. It's a matter of life and death." Veronika stared at the phone in her hand long after Tanya had hung up, her mind whirling. A matter of life and death? What on earth could that mean? She had half a mind to ignore the cryptic summons, to wash her hands of Ashutosh and his riddles once and for all. But some deep-rooted instinct told her this was important, that she would regret it forever if she didn't go. And so, 2 days later, Veronika found herself standing outside the gates of the sprawling Kapoor mansion, her heart in her throat as she waited for someone to answer the door. When Tanya ushered her inside, greeting her with cool politeness, Veronika couldn't help but gape at the opulence surrounding her. The gleaming marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the priceless antiques displayed on every surface. It made Veronika's upper-middle-class upbringing seem positively humble in comparison. Tanya led her to a sunny sitting room overlooking the carefully manicured gardens. There, ensconced in a high-backed wheelchair, sat one of the most beautiful girls Veronika had ever seen. Her delicate features were utterly exquisite, like a porcelain doll come to life. But there was something not quite right about her flawless face, a blankness in her topaz eyes, a slackness to her rosebud mouth. "Veronika, meet my sister Prerna," Tanya said gently, crouching down to adjust the blanket over the other girl's unmoving legs. "Prerna, this is Ashutosh's friend I was telling you about. The one who's going to help us." At the mention of Ashutosh's name, Prerna's eyes suddenly focused, her gaze boring into Veronika with unsettling intensity. Her lips moved soundlessly, as if she were trying to speak. Tanya noticed Veronika's confusion and quickly explained. "Prerna has autism and cerebral palsy. She can understand everything we say, but she has difficulty communicating. We've developed a system over the years, though. Her eyes, her facial expressions. If you pay close attention, you can learn to read her quite well." Veronika nodded slowly, still trying to process what she was seeing. This was Ashutosh's fiancée? This fragile, broken girl who looked barely older than a child? It didn't make any sense. As if reading her thoughts, Tanya leaned forward and began to speak in a low, urgent voice. She told Veronika about their father's deal with Ashutosh's family, the promise that had bound him to Prerna since childhood. She spoke of Prerna's deep love for Ashutosh, how she had come to depend on his kindness and patience over the years. But she also revealed the truth that Prerna had long suspected, that Ashutosh's heart belonged to another. To Veronika, "Prerna doesn't want to be a burden," Tanya said softly, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "She knows Ashutosh is only marrying her out of duty, out of gratitude to our father. but it's tearing her apart to see him so unhappy. So she reached out to me, begged me to find a way to set him free. And when I discovered your connection, I knew it was fate. You're the only one who can make this right, Veronika. The only one who can save them both." Veronika felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was being asked of her. How could she possibly untangle this mess, undo the years of sacrifice and obligation that had brought Ashutosh to this point? She looked at Prerna helplessly, at a loss for words, but Prerna held her gaze steadily, a fierce determination blazing in those uncanny eyes. With a trembling hand, she gestured to the iPad mounted on her wheelchair tray, painstakingly typing out a message one letter at a time. P-L-E-A-S-E. The single word hung in the air between them, a desperate plea that pierced Veronika to the core. In that moment, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not again. Not when so much was at stake. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity as Tanya and Veronika hatched their plan. Veronika called her parents, explaining the situation and begging for their blessing. They were understandably shocked at first, but ultimately gave their approval, trusting in their daughter's judgment. Meanwhile, Tanya worked tirelessly to convince her father to allow Prerna to back out of the wedding, citing her fragile health and emotional state. Dr. Kapoor was initially resistant, unwilling to go back on his word. But in the end, his love for his daughter won out. He agreed to release Ashutosh from his vow on one condition, that Prerna herself be the one to break the news to her erstwhile fiancé. And so, on the day that was meant to be his wedding day, Ashutosh found himself sitting across from Prerna in the flower-bedecked mandip, his eyes wide with confusion and concern. Tanya and Veronika stood close by, their hearts in their throats as they waited for Prerna to make her move. With shaking fingers, Prerna reached out and grasped Ashutosh's hand, her grip surprisingly strong for one so frail. She gazed up at him with those fathomless eyes, willing him to understand what she could not say aloud. Slowly, painfully, she began to trace letters on his palm with her trembling fingertip. E-L-O-V-E-I-O-U. Ashutosh inhaled sharply, his eyes filling with tears as he realized what she was trying to tell him. "I love you too, Prerna," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "You know that. You've always been like a sister to me." But Prerna shook her head fiercely, frustration evident in the set of her delicate jaw. She jabbed at her iPad impatiently, the robotic voice ringing out in the hushed silence of the mandip. "No. Not like sister. Let you go. Be happy. With her." Ashutosh followed Prerna's line of sight, his heart leaping into his throat as he spotted Veronika standing a few feet away, resplendent in a cream and gold wedding lehenga. She smiled at him tentatively, her eyes brimming with love and hope. Understanding dawned on Ashutosh in stages, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place one by one. The mysterious phone call that had brought Veronika here, Prerna's strangely calm demeanor these past few days, Tanya's furtive whispering with the wedding planners. It had all been leading up to this moment, this incredible, impossible gift. He looked at Prerna again, marveling at the strength and selflessness of this remarkable girl. "Are you sure?" he asked softly, searching her face for any sign of hesitation or regret. "Is this truly what you want?" In answer, Prerna reached up and cupped Ashutosh's face in her small hand, her thumb brushing away the single tear that had escaped down his cheek. Her smile was radiant, transcendent, a smile of pure, unconditional love. "Yes," she mouthed, her voice a barely audible rasp. "Go. Be happy." Ashutosh surged forward and gathered Prerna into a fierce embrace, burying his face in her glossy black hair. "Thank you," he choked out over and over again. "Thank you for saving my life, for saving both our lives." When at last he pulled away, he turned to find Veronika and Tanya both wiping away tears of their own. Dr. Kapoor stood to one side, his lined face a mask of conflicting emotions, pride, sorrow, resignation. But when Ashutosh approached him, hand outstretched, the older man clasped it firmly, his grip conveying all the words he could not speak. The wedding that followed was unlike any Habib Ganj had ever seen. The guests were bewildered at first, shocked by the sudden change of bride. But as the story spread, as they witnessed the joy and love radiating from Ashutosh and Veronika as they took their 7 sacred vows, a palpable sense of rightness settled over the assembly. This was the way it was always meant to be. 2 hearts, 2 souls united as one, bound not by duty or obligation, but by the truest, purest love. In the years that followed, Ashutosh and Veronika built a beautiful life together in the heart of Habib Ganj. With the help of their families, they opened their own coaching center, nurturing the minds and dreams of countless young students. They named their firstborn daughter Prerna, in honor of the girl who had sacrificed so much for their happiness. And though they faced their share of challenges and heartaches, as all couples do, they faced them hand in hand, secure in the knowledge that their love could weather any storm. For they had been tested in the crucible of fate, their bond forged in the fire of adversity, and they had emerged stronger, truer, more radiant than ever before. As for Prerna, she surprised everyone by outliving all the doctor's dire predictions. Bolstered by the unwavering love and support of her family, she found joy and purpose in championing the cause of the differently abled. She joined forces with an NGO dedicated to education and employment opportunities for those with special needs, using her own life as a shining example of all that was possible. And on warm summer evenings, when the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the chirping of crickets, the 3 of them, Ashutosh, Veronika, and Prerna, would sit together in the dappled shade of the great banyan tree that sheltered the coaching center grounds. They would talk and laugh and reminisce, marveling at the strange, winding road that had brought them to this point. The road to Habib Ganj, to happiness, to home.